think we're recording.
Woohoo.
It's good to see you. Haven't seen you since we last recorded a month ago.
Yeah. Putting 2022 to bed.
I've said this so many times, but when I was really reflecting on 2022, I was like, what a dumpster fire of a year.
And I think we
so
literally said that about
me.
2021 and 2020. So yeah, definitely dumpster fire of a year.
It feels like pretty much since COVID hit, we're almost into year 3. It's been like I feel like I've done a lot, but I haven't really accomplished like life goals kind of things. And I'm really ready to like work towards some of my own goals this year. Yeah, like finishing my book and I don't know, doing some of the other stuff instead of just like maybe surviving or kind of clawing my way back, from the abyss.
The perpetual abyss, yeah. Uh-huh. I think we talked a while ago about like just COVID brain and not kind of how spacey everyone is and how like communication is so challenging because we spent 2 years really not being around people. I have not gotten over that. Like I still find myself particularly in social situations because I'm not in them a lot, just sort of stepping back and going, why the hell am I here? And not knowing what to say and like tripping over my tongue, and it's yeah, I would just like sort of to feel normal again, which I haven't felt normal in 3 years. Not that I know what normal is, but yeah.
Well, I'm laying down prayers for you and everyone listening to feel whatever normal is for you in 2023. I don't know, the Red Nation had a big like planning meeting last week, kind of like what are we trying to do, trying to chart out 2023. And we actually hadn't done that in a really long time. And I don't know, I think I said this before, but it feels like just feeling more organized, not feeling, but being more organized and being purposeful. As in, like, we might actually be able to have plans and to execute those plans, and they might actually work out and they won't be upended by catastrophic world events or like catastrophic personal events, the kind that just like so utterly destabilize you that you, like I said, you basically spend enormous amounts of time and energy clawing your way back to just like pretty basic stability. So me personally, I'm really looking forward to kind of commanding space in my life for building things that I really care about. Like I said, goals. Normal for me, I'm a very goal-oriented person. And so my normal is like making decisions about what I want to achieve and then like pretty much working my ass off to achieve those things. I've always been like that. And I don't feel like I've been able to do that for years, actually. Yeah.
I think that's setting a goal of setting goals is actually makes sense to me. I mean, that makes absolute sense to me because I think, yeah, there was a sense in the last couple of years of just why bother because what's next to disrupt our universe. And I don't know, I think maybe also there's this sense of after getting through the pandemic and all of the craziness that was going along with it, there's a sense of sort of exfoliation. Like
It's a good word.
I've shed a lot of why the hell was I doing those things?
Oh, for sure.
Because they didn't feed my spirit. They didn't do anything for me intellectually, and so I think there's an in-between space too. Like um, I want to be, in every sense of the word, lean and agile and able to move and able to adapt. But I don't want to be carrying all those things that I carried before.
Yeah.
Because I think we all learned a lot about what's important in our lives. Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like for me, the biggest thing that I was carrying was almost like codependency in a way, or like relationships with people I cared about, but the relationships were not healthy relationships, you know? And this includes like comrades and family and, you know, lots of different contexts. And so trying to think about how to have relationships with folks, especially like movement relationships. I find movement relationships really hard. I think like identity politics makes movement relationships hard for me. And so like people struggling with like being accountable and like responsible for themselves and then coming to the work, having done some of that for themselves already and not expecting the movement to be a space where they can like find themselves or find structure for themselves. So there's like a very Navajo perspective too. But yeah, I'm looking forward to like having a much stronger balance between independence and self-reliance, which are two kind of core values for Diné people, according to Diné philosophy. But then also just having healthier relationships when I am in relationship with folks, especially with the movement kind of stuff, the movement and the intellectual work. But yeah, being lean, exfoliating. Yeah, 2022 was like, it was a free for all. That's really how it felt. 2020 and 2021 felt like just like the world was drowning is kind of how that felt. And so just trying to like triage. And 2022 also felt like triage at a more personal level, but much more of a like everything everywhere all at once. Just having to constantly respond to things. And I am so over that. I am tired of just responding to things. I'm ready to like build. I'm ready to have like boundaries. Like that's, yeah. And in my mind, that means being more organized and having routine. And, you know, even if things get upended, not responding so dramatically. I think to the upending and being like, no. No, I'm going to keep my feet on the ground and I'm going to keep marching forward in these ways that feel good to me and purposeful. And no, you're not going to yank me off my path.
Yeah. 2021 to me was like, when I think of 2021, I just think fire. I just think everything was on fire. And like you said, everything everywhere all at once. And we spent a lot of time reacting. And now I think having gone through that, there's a wisdom that was gained there that I think I learned more in that 1 year than I did in the 10 years prior.
Wow.
And now I just want to say, like, something crazy happens in the world. Okay, then what are we gonna do about it? Instead of like 2021 was, oh my God, what do we do? We gotta organize a protest. We gotta go to a rally. Now it's like, okay, I'm gonna think about this for a minute.
Yeah. And like, what are some of the bigger picture, like long-term power building kind of strategies that we're going to be engaging in? I think Red Media is definitely a strategy to build Indigenous power for sure. And it's obviously long-term. I mean, building this organization has been a gargantuan effort. We've done most of it through the pandemic, and we're just now getting some stability, I would say. So,
but it feels good to be taking our time, whether, and some of it was not our choice, like trying to get the 501c3 approved was, you know, a monumental task, and we wished it would have happened earlier than it did, but it forced us to slow down and sort of take our time thinking about things and creating, and it was a lesson. It was a good lesson, and I love that we can build strong and carefully and slowly, you know, at our own pace. That feels good.
Yeah, Comrade Kylie You know, like in the history of the Red Nation and then definitely Red Media, we've always been very action oriented, which is good. It's good to be praxis, you know, oriented, where we're always like out here, we're like doing this and we're doing that and we're writing a book and we're organizing a protest and we're starting a new organization and then we're recruiting all these people. You know, we're like doing a podcast series and all of this stuff. And that's really good. But I feel like we're in this place where it's like we're catching up with ourselves. And Kylie was like, I would really like in 2023 for us to stop doing so many things all the time, like new things. And she's like, I want us to slow down with what we're already doing. And I want us to catch up with what we're already doing. Yep. So that we have a really strong foundation for launching the next, you know, series of, you know, inevitably the things.
Whatever comes next.
Whatever we're always doing. So yeah, it's like a slow burner, I feel like, kind of year. Comrade Justine did tell me that if you're into horoscopes, or like the zodiac, is that what that's called? I don't know. Astrology, that's what it's called. I'm sorry. I'm like one of these older millennials who doesn't really care that much about that. Sorry. For the people who do. But I think through like March, things are fairly calm, but there's going to be this like epic, like massive epical shift that's going to be happening in 2023. And I was like, dear God, please don't let it be like another just like fire that we have to respond to. I mean, hopefully like we ease into like this revolutionary change that's happening. Revolutionary change doesn't always have to be like, as Elena says, burning something down overnight, you know? Maybe it can just be like a slow burner. I'm in the mood for a slow burner.
Yep. Me too. Definitely. Well, that was a recap of our recap of 2022.
I'm sorry. I just started. I'm like having a therapy session on our PH, but
it's what a great introduction.
Aw, well, that's not what we're talking about. It's true. Today, we promised everyone that our first episode of 2023 would be a review of season 2 of the FX show Reservation Dogs. So that's what we're gonna do. I think we're just gonna go chronologically through the episodes. Season 2 was 10 episodes. Was season 1 10 episodes?
I think season 1 was 8.
8.
But
Okay.
Season 2 was 10, and it was almost like each one was a gift. I mean, I loved season 1, and season 1, you know, we talked about before, and it was almost a lot of trepidation around that first episode for me, because I was thinking so many television series, like the first season out of the gate, they're great, and then the second season they fall apart.
Or like sequel movies for like really good movies, you're like, oh, never as good. But that's not the case here.
Season 2 was actually, I hesitate to say better, but maybe it was just better because it was longer. I just thought it was fantastic, and yeah. So episode 1 starts exactly where we left off, with post-tornado, and Uncle Brownie is sitting there in his all together after having stopped the tornado, and he's talking to the spirit, and like that's literally where we left off with last season, where he's running around with no clothes on, and I think we even talked about
his native dad bod.
His native dad bod. Which is where we start out. And it's just, it's great to see, like right off the bat, we got to see, so Uncle Brownie and Buck. So our 2 OG native actors together again. And Willie Jack, who I adore, is trying to break the curse that she laid on Jackie, because everything has gone wrong. Laura Dannon has taken off, and Bear is just in a funk, and there was a tornado, and all of this. So she's trying to stop the curse. And what I love is the first time you see Wes Studi, who plays Buck, is he's getting his hair cut, and Willie Jack has obviously gathered some hair from this front porch hairdresser to lay the curse on Jackie, which is and you and I talked about that before, about the superstition that Native people have about leaving any part of your physical body around. I mean, when I was younger, anytime you cut fingernails or hair, your hairbrush, anything, you didn't leave it in strange places. Like you either washed it down the sink or flushed it down the toilet, but you didn't leave stuff around. And so that episode, to me, I was hysterical. I was like, oh my God, she's gone to the hairdresser and gotten the hair. And that's how she's laid the curse. And the hairdresser, of course, the woman is appalled because she says, I didn't give you any hair. And Buck is there sweeping his hair up so no one can put a curse on him. But that's how it starts. And it's just right out of the gate. It's so spot on with Native people.
Yeah, don't they so Buck and Uncle Brownie, which is like Wes Studi, right? And Gary Farmer. They lead it's Willie Jack, Bear, and Cheese, or was it just Willie Jack and Cheese to the river?
Bear was there in the beginning, but then Bear's going through some shit. So Bear jumps out of the truck actually and leaves Willie Jack and Cheese to go on the lifting the curse ceremonial journey,
which takes them to a river. And I mean, you need to tell the story about when you were in the protest in Santa Fe. Was it around Indigenous Peoples Day? But, you know, of course, they start singing Tom Petty, Free Falling, or I forgot what it was.
Yep. And it's so classic because you got these two old guys who are really the OGs of Native actors. And they're on the side of this river and they're making it up as they go along. So first, Uncle Brownie says he will not help with the curse lift the curse because in his opinion, Willie Jack has messed with something she shouldn't have messed with. So they go to Buck, and Buck says he'll help. So then of course Brownie has to help because you can't have one without the other. And they go to the side of the river and they've gathered up some of Jackie's stuff and they tie it up in a bandana and they put it in the river. And then Brownie and Buck, actually Brownie starts praying to the Creator to help these young people do the right thing. And then he says, and by the way, we also have to pray for old friends who don't realize that they should not sleep with friends, old ladies, even when they're broken up. And then Buck joins in and says, and oh, Creator, please remind some friends that I forgive them for sleeping with said old lady when we were broken up. And it goes on, and you see Cheese and Willie Jack looking at each other, and Cheese says, oh, old people's lives are so complicated. But then they ended by we need a song. We need an old song. So they start singing. So they start singing Free Falling by Tom Petty. And then the spirit appears on the other side of the river, who's, of course, Dallas Goldtooth. And he starts singing, and then the music starts playing. And it's quite dramatic. But that episode, I mean, I just watched it again, and I was hysterical. I mean, it makes me laugh every time I see it. But on Indigenous Peoples Day, we did a rally and protest around the Kit Carson Memorial in Ogapoge, which the mayor had promised to take down 2 years ago, never came down. And so we were gathering in Cathedral Park, where we usually gather, and we did a prayer, and we were standing holding signs, and my daughter and I are holding the banner, the Red Nation banner, and we're sort of in the front, and someone towards the back says, should we be singing when we leave the park? And so I started singing Free Falling, and everybody from the front to the back started singing and laughing. And it was such a moment because you knew everybody knew where that came from. I mean, obviously it came from Tom Petty, but everybody knew, and you knew it was almost like this was an anthem because of Reservation Dogs, and that it was actually joyful too and funny because it just, I think, speaks to us because we all know people like that, and we all have had experiences like that, and it was amazing. It was hysterical. So I think every time something like that happens, I'm going to start singing Tom Petty again.
I think maybe when the Red Nation is out doing hardcore actions, we should sing Free Falling just to bring some levity to the situation.
And the words are so sort of anathema to anything that I would sing. She's a good girl.
Loves her mama.
Loves Jesus and America too. No, not really. But
I think that episode, that's like episode 2, right? The curse lifting episode, or is that one? Maybe it's 1 and 2. I forgot, but I like at first I was like, ooh, this feels kind of like, this is irreverent, but it's almost like maybe sacrilegious a little bit. It might like hit some Native people who are very like spiritual, I guess, and religious in the wrong way, like poking fun at a song, to laying a curse down at the river or something. But then I was like, what I really like about the show is that it doesn't pull any punches when it comes to authenticity, which is something we commented on, I think, with season 1. It's not like, it doesn't shove like a Native identity, what might be considered authentic kind of spiritual identity or practices, down your throat at all. And I think that the irreverence and the humor, even around something like a curse or like taking someone's hair or like trying to sing a quote unquote like sacred song at the river to release something like that. And then you have like a spirit across the river who's just like singing Tom Petty with you instead of this like sacred song, right? Because he's like the pathetic Lakota warrior who fell off his horse instead of counting coup or whatever when Custer died. And so I think the irreverence keeps the show out of the space of commenting on like what authenticity is, which is like a trap. I'd say like an identity politics trap that you see a lot. First of all, with how Native people are stereotyped. But then I think often with how we stereotype each other and talk about our own stories. And every time you think that the show is going to get into that terrain, it's like, nope. It like wags its finger at you. And then it's like, nope, we're not doing that. And then it just like moves on to the next storyline. Even at the same time, it's incredibly heartfelt. And you see yourself in these characters over and over and over again in the scenarios because it's very real. It feels very like real. It feels very authentic. In terms of like the lived reality of Native people without being pious about authenticity politics. And that is like a really difficult, what is that? Like, that's like a difficult fence to straddle. And I think the show does it very beautifully and very well. And all the episodes are written by completely different people. I'm assuming they're in the writing rooms together. And many of them cross over from writing and directing various episodes, but it seems very intentional, but it's also, I don't know, there's like a kind of like care and brilliance to it that I really appreciate. And the humor is what like helps to navigate that like kind of murky space in the show.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. And I think the different nations that are represented, both in the writer's room and the directing, I think help with that fence straddling because you're writing about a nation or in Oklahoma, and that's not the reality. Their spiritual ceremonial whatever reality isn't the same as everyone else's.
Right.
So you run the risk of making it irreverent and funny for some nations and offending others, possibly. But I don't see that they have done that. I think you're exactly right, Mel. They're straddling that fence so beautifully, and making it funny, but also making it heartfelt and just very sweet in a way that you have these two elders who are doing their best to pass on knowledge that they may or may not really have.
Clearly. I think the may not is. But they're elders, right? They're being cast as elders, and so they're like, oh shit, we have to act like elders.
We have to perform, yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. So that was sort of episode 2 with on the res, and then of course you have Elora, Dan, and Jackie, who are going through their own hell on the road trying to get to California, and their car breaks down. They get
in like Western Oklahoma, right? Is that what you're thinking? Is like where they break down? Okay.
Yeah, because they were picked up by they were hitchhiking. They were picked up by the guy who said, "Well, I can get you as far as Amarillo." And I'm thinking, okay, Oklahoma, Amarillo. And then they're that guy turns out to be ultra creepy, so they stab him and kick him and jump out of the car and escape with all of their belongings still left in the car, so they have no money. They try to steal a car, and then they get chased by the rednecks with the Confederate flags, and end up at that crazy rich woman's house, who feeds them spaghetti taco casserole.
Okay. The different shades of whiteness in that episode were hilarious. It felt like, has anyone ever seen the movie August Osage County?
Yeah.
So it harkened back to when Bear's mom in season 1 has a one-night stand with this guy who ends up, having a Confederate tattoo on his forearm, and then she gets the hell out of there. She like sees it at breakfast, like the morning after. Sorry, I just hit my mic. And I think like the commentary on the different kinds of white families in Oklahoma is very interesting in the episode where Elora and Jackie break down and are like trying to get to California, and then they eventually try to return once Elora finds out that her grandmother is, I believe, very like gravely ill and sick. And so, yeah, the taco spaghetti casserole, like, you can't make that up. It's just like here in Minnesota, it's not called it's called like hot dish. It's called hot dish. It's like a Northern European settler thing where you just kind of like put together a casserole out of like the things that are in your fridge or like leftovers, which I can understand like poor and working class families doing because they don't have the money to buy food. But this particular tradition is really gross. It's like, I don't know, it's things that should not be eaten together, put into a dish, and then you just put like mayonnaise and cheese with it or something. I don't know. As a person who comes from like a chili-based people in the Southwest, I find it like profoundly disturbing. This kind of cuisine. But yeah, that's what that episode reminded me of.
And then the
like
rich woman whose husband has left her, plops this dish in front of Elora, Dan, and Jackie, and she says, "Just pass me the rolls. Since my husband left me, I'm all carbs all the time." And she takes these white dinner rolls and covers them in ranch dressing, and that's what she's eating. And I was like, oh God.
No, it's mayonnaise, cheese, and ranch dressing. It's those three things together.
And they're all white. Well, I made mayonnaise, ranch dressing, and white bread. Some cheese is not white, but some cheese is also colored. Anyway, that's irrelevant. But yeah, it's all that white food that oh my God. And we don't come from cultures like that. Like, Pueblo were all about the stew, and it's simple. It's meat, it's vegetables, and that's it. Like this white bread and white like dressings is just weird and gross, but all kinds of whiteness.
So that's like that episode, right? And so by episode 3, we're back in the community,
Yep.
because Alora has had to find her way back home to her grandmother. And
Yep.
in that episode, her grandmother passes away, right?
So that's 4. We
Oh,
we
whoops.
have a little break with the roofing episode.
Oh,
3.
shoot, sorry. That was such a good episode too.
Yeah. What was great about that episode is, that so Reservation Dogs sort of vacillates between having action, like when you're on the road with Alora, Dan, and Jackie, there's action. When you're down at the river with Buck and Brownie, that's sort of an action. But the roofing episode was just like this heartfelt conversation, and it was beautiful. And it was beautiful because it was men having this, which you don't see. You never see Native men depicted as sensitive or having feelings or anything like that.
Yeah, it was very like calm. It was almost like a meditation, and like an intergenerational group of men kind of talking about, yeah, feelings. Bear, is it like Daniel's father, right? Bear and Daniel's father finally have like a real heart to heart, I think for the first time since Daniel's suicide the prior year. And they come to like an understanding with one another. That's actually really touching. Chad Charlie, who we had on RPH in March of last year, wrote, I think was the lead writer on that episode. That must have been the episode he was talking about. I think that he was working on it at the time that he came on the podcast. Yeah, just a lot of subtlety. It's a lot of subtlety in that episode.
And it was a sort of a redemption, because you had Daniel's father who was, talking about abusing alcohol, and then you had Bear who doesn't really have a father because his father is that crazy rapper, who in season 1 was supposed to come out, and they beaded a penis for him, and
a penis microphone.
Penis microphone. Yeah, and so you have, someone who lost a son and someone who lost a father coming together and actually talking, and it could have been really bad, and it was really good.
Yeah, I think season 1, I was very struck, and I'm pretty sure I said this on the episode we did last year about it. The commentary on masculinity in Reservation Dogs is something I was like on the fence about. I was like, I'm not really sure I care much about like the inner turmoil and the journeys of Native men. But I think this particular episode, which was definitely about, Native men talking to each other and like helping each other through something difficult, I actually really liked it. So yeah, not necessarily like a episode that redeemed that, but again, I think does a really careful job, I think, with really important things for Native people, and certainly masculinity is a very important thing that's very difficult to talk about. I mean, I find in Native communities and even in political work, for sure. We talk a lot about feminism. We don't talk a lot about masculinity. So,
yeah, it was a great episode, and the metaphor of them being on the roof.
Yeah,
and sort of Bear being isolated and uncertain where to go, and then there's a scene where I forget the two rappers, who the brothers, the twins, and I can never remember their names.
Oh, I forgot. I don't remember their names either.
Nico anyway, they're actual musicians, rappers, and there's a scene where Bear is walking down the streets and he's all bummed out, and he says, "I'm looking, I need work," and they're having a talk about they ask him, "Where's the gang?" And he says, "What gang?" And the Reservation Dogs, where are they? And he says, "Well, Laura Dannon left." And one of the musicians says, "Oh, so the head of your gang is gone." And he's like, "What do you mean the head of the gang? And what about the second head of the gang?" Willie Jack. And it's clear that Bear's like, "Wait a minute, it's my gang." And clearly it's not, because they're both off doing other things, and he's the one who's by himself walking down the street. And so you get that sort of sense of being lost and being alone. And then he ends up with this job and being on the roof. But he's on the roof, and there are these grown men who are helping him to sort of find his place. And then you see almost instantaneous maturity, because the next episode is when Elora Dannon's grandmother dies.
Yeah, and all of the friends come together. They even reconcile with Jackie in an effort to support Elora. But yeah, like Bear's character, he kind of like fumbles through stuff. I guess he was maybe kind of supposed to be the protagonist of the show, but I feel like that's switched up a lot, and there's just so many different characters, and each episode kind of profiles the stories of each of the character, and you get deeper into the characters. So I wouldn't necessarily say that Bear is still the protagonist of the show. But yeah, I feel like that one episode did a lot of work in giving him some like stability. Even though like clearly the women run the show in so many ways. Like his mom makes him the little tool belt, then he gets made fun of by the other men at the work site. But yeah, it's like I said, I'm down. I can dig that like slow burner approach to like the commentary on, just having enough Native men of an older generation around to like mentor younger generations of Native men. Even the scene where like Bucky and Uncle Brownie are singing Free Falling, because they obviously don't know. They probably just don't know traditional songs, but they're like still trying to impart something onto these youth in the community. You see like multiple generations of men, of Creek men. And it's, it's like messy. It's messy and very real, but at least they're trying. And that's real. That's some real shit. You're talking about some real shit when it comes to like contemporary Native life. It's like the crisis of intergenerational masculinity. Because so many of our men are like gone. They're incarcerated, right? Lots of gangs and stuff like that. So...
And the struggles with alcohol and drugs.
Yep.
On a lot of reservations, that they are gone. And when you see men, doing their best and trying not only to be good parents, good fathers, but also good uncles and good brothers and good sons, then it really stands out, and it doesn't look like settler culture. You don't see a lot of Native men out there coaching their sons' little league teams, because, well, we just don't have that on the res. We had softball, but it is. I mean, in a real way, it's a beautiful thing to see.
Yeah, it really is. No, it really is. It's like people doing their best. It's men doing their best. So yeah, that is something that kind of annoyed me, I think, with the first season, but I'm not so annoyed by it anymore. I think I feel appreciative now. And so yeah, by episode 4, we're in Elora's grandma's house, which I believe is where Elora is raised by her grandma. And you hear those really beautiful hymnals. Is that what they're called? Like Creek hymnals? I don't know. I apologize. I don't know anything about that like part of the indigenous experience in the South or in places like Eastern Oklahoma. Like we just don't have that, out in Navajo. But I find the singing to be very, it's really striking. It's very powerful. It's very moving, and it's like unlike music I've ever heard, to be completely honest with you. I'm just talking out of pure ignorance, but hearing the songs as they're all sitting around her grandma's bedside, and then you hear more of those songs later on in the season. It's just really, I don't know. I love that kind of how it punctuates the really poignant aspects of the show.
Yep. And the other thing, just, I found myself just nodding, that the whole community comes together, because you don't see that a lot in mainstream white culture. But everybody comes together and sits in her room.
They cook a lot.
The kids are all, in the kitchen, and, having kids preparing the meal. They're all in there together, and it's a place where a lot of communication takes place, which is, of course, the way kitchens are anyway. But yeah, you see Willie Jack and Laura Dannon and Jackie and even Cheese and Bear trying to help cook food, and then the aunties are there, of course. But the idea that the whole community comes together to support the family, and also, because this is an elder and they are there to help transition the elder into the next world. And it may have looked different, and that definitely the songs were different than I've heard, but it's the same. It's the same.
Yeah, it's like everyone comes together and they eat and they talk, and it's very fluid, and it's several days. Like it happens over the course of several days. So, and at the end of that episode, the grandmother, passes on her journey, and it doesn't the grandma have like a conversation with Dallas Goldtooth's character, like the spirit in the backyard by the barbecue or something, and it's like something like help her not be such a shit ass, or something really funny. And then she like walks on, and then the end of the episode, you find that Elora has inherited her grandmother's home. So Elora has this new home and this new responsibility coming out of episode 4.
Yeah, Mabel actually says goodbye to Elora and tells her, don't sell, and I want to say it's like some sort of a China something. Don't sell that, or I'll come back and haunt you. And then Laura Dannon is kind of waiting for some great words of wisdom, and she says,
yeah, exactly.
Don't be a shit ass.
Again, another moment where it's like you expect reverence, and you expect this like gesture towards this like holier than thou kind of like a spiritual wisdom, and instead it's like, don't be a shit ass. So, which, let's be real, I'm sure many of our elders, that has been their parting thought.
I hope these kids don't be shit asses.
Aw. So that's the close of episode 4. Then episode 5 is the famous episode. I think it's episode 5 is probably the first most talked about episode, of the season, I would say.
Yeah.
And that's the aunties at the IHS conference.
and I love the comment, and I have to say I can't remember all their names, but it is Jana Schmiedling, and they're sitting out, and Bear's mom, and they're sitting out like in their front yard, and Jana's character says, "Are you going to the IHS conference?" She says, "No, I should stay with everything Bear's going through. I should stay." And Jan says, "Oh, come on. You need a break. White people go to Cancun, Native people go to IHS conferences."
It's so true. And then you like see them sitting around a table and I don't know, someone's giving a keynote and they all have their like beaded lanyards on, which is everybody knows. I mean, it's not just an IHS conference. It's like the ACES conference. It's like NIYC. It's like all of the really major national Indian conferences. You always get beaded lanyards as like the swag, from the conference. And so especially if you work in that world, you probably have like 30 beaded lanyards and you keep all of them because they're beaded. And so then they just like sit in a pile somewhere. It's like maybe like settlers collect beer cozies, Native people collect beaded lanyards.
There's so much in that episode. And, each episode is only 25, 30 minutes, but there's so much in that episode that is amazing. Just IHS culture and how so Tatanka Means plays the grand poobah, the big guy. He's giving the keynote, and of course all the women are like, ooh, goo goo gaga over him. And then they go out after the keynote and they're walking around the booths where people set up with supposedly things that will help you in your health journeys. And there's one booth where they have like the crystal dildos and and then the tea that they that's not even tea, I don't know what you call it, like potpourri that they all squat over to.
Oh, they'd like the vaginal steaming.
Steaming, that's what it is. Yes.
Oh God, I forgot about that.
So this is like all of the aunties together, and they're doing the vaginal steaming. They put all this concoction in like a hot pot, and then they all squat over it, and that's how they get ready to go to the evening event, and they're wearing their best outfits and talking about snagging and but there's a sort of an underlying theme, which is one of the group of 5 women has left and she went off to college and then she didn't come back to the res.
Right.
And there's that, to me, really poignant scene where, they all say, well, you left.
Yeah, there's resentment towards her for sure.
Right. And then she says, what I wouldn't give to have kids and work at IHS right now. So on the other hand, there's this loneliness for her because she's left and she's not followed the same path as the other one. And life is hard when you don't have your community. And I think that's true in literally every Native nation. That, those who leave, you leave a lot behind.
I mean, that's kind of my situation right now. Like, I live in some other nation's homelands. Like, I haven't met a single Diné person here in the Twin Cities. And that's shocking. I've never actually been anywhere in my entire life. I wasn't either surrounded by my own people or had strong relationships with a lot of Navajo people who are in a place. And you're right, you give up a lot. But what all of the other 4 women who have stayed back in the community, when you stay in the community, you take on a lot of responsibility. You have to help raise multiple generations. You take care of elders who are aging. You like relationality is like intense when you're in those multi-generational homes and communities and Native communities. So like the resentment for the people who leave, who don't have to take on as much of that responsibility, but those people are also trying to accomplish something, and they're also giving up the community, even though the sense of community can sometimes be, frankly, overwhelming. And you see a lot of that in the show. Like the responsibility is sometimes crushing. Yep.
And we all know that most of that responsibility is shouldered by the women. And you see that in season 1 with Bear's mom trying to protect him because she knows, what a shit ass his dad is, and that every time Bear gets his hopes up, his father crushes them. So she's trying to protect him and be the best parent that she can be. And, I don't know what the percentages are, but I'm going to say a huge percentage of the single parents are women. They're always women, and the women are also the aunts. And the women are the they're the aunties, they're the cousins, they're the ones who take care, of the elders. And so to see that juxtaposed with this sort of big flaming, just party of,
yeah, they just want to let loose. Like
yeah.
the IHS conference is their vacation from like the multiple responsibilities of caregiving and caretaking that they have back at home. So they just get into their like too tight dresses, they smoke some weed, they take some shots, and then in their minds they're like, a girl band dancing on the dance floor. And they're out to snag, I think isn't it Bear's mom who's trying to snag Tonka Means, the keynote speaker. And anyway, I don't know if people know what snagging is, but it's basically just like hooking up. And so this is teepee creeping, is teepee crawling. And I love the very final scene where I think they're all getting into the elevator. They just look hungover and rugged. They're going down, and the IHS doctor from their community is like coming out of the elevator or something like that. He's like, only has his chones on, and he's completely covered in hickeys.
And lipstick.
He just looks like destroyed, just has been like that snag. He's just been destroyed by a Native woman. And it was I just died because I was like, yeah.
Yep.
Like, yup.
And one of them asks him, well, what happened? And he's just this big smile. I snagged. It's like his very first time snagging because he's not Native. And so he's like just been introduced into the world of snagging culture. Oh man, it was just brilliant. That was a brilliant show. It was a brilliant one, and the women, I mean, they're also like every one of them. Like, so the Janice Schmiedling character, when you see her before the last scene, she's off to go snag someone. One of the other women she's got two. She goes into her hotel room with two guys.
Oh, that's right. That's right.
And then the two, so Bear's mom and the one who has left the res, they end up watching, I don't know if it's CSI or some crime show on TV, and they've taken everything out of the mini bar, so they're eating like Oreos and taking shots of Jack Daniels. And the last thing she says is, "Uh-oh, can you hold my hair right now?" Yes. Like, okay, she's gonna go Ralph in the toilet. And
I mean, let's be honest, every single scene that happened in that episode was like something that someone had actually experienced and wrote about. And then it became an episode. That was some true life in that episode.
And then there's the flashbacks of like using the truck as a drum and singing 49er songs in the parking lot. Which is like, oh yeah, I've seen that. Uh-huh.
Yep.
Funny.
Big conferences, powwows, like that's what that episode was about.
Yep.
It was a glorious showcase of that. That aspect. Yeah. Good times. Yeah, that was hilarious. So there's 10 episodes. Okay, we're like 54 minutes into this episode. I feel like, should we be moving faster? I don't know. I did have us do this like journey of like self-discovery at the beginning for 10 minutes, but so it's my fault.
It was
whatever. Let's just keep talking.
Yeah.
Let's just keep talking the way that we want to talk.
So the next one that is Decolonization, which was hysterical.
So good. Oh my God. That episode was so fucking good.
It, it was so, and it was so like, I don't know, like with Brownie and Buck by the river, I was just grooving and like, oh my God, this is so good, this is so good, and laughing and laughing. And with this episode, it was so cringe, but it was so good. But it was so cringe because we've all seen these people, we know these people, and you just want to go, oh my God, really?
Yeah.
But yeah.
It's like the I call them like no, I'm not gonna say this. I guess, but kind of like post Standing Rock, kind of like the water protector figure. Okay, water protectors are heroes of our people, don't get me wrong. Anyone who self-identifies and actually practices the ethics of a water protector, has my undying respect. We do a lot of frontline work with them in the Red Nation. That said, there is also this like weird social media aesthetic of the water protector where it became kind of like you wear like camo and then you have on like the skirt, you have the Sani scarf, the one that I have on my head, right? So then you start making all different kinds of clothing out of Sani scarves, or you're like, it's kind of like this like neo-traditional, like you wanting to dress to look a particular way. And it's a certain kind of like performance of indigeneity that very much plays into the authenticity politics that I feel like the show really refuses. And so this like this kind of like online influencer version of the water protector has become very ubiquitous, I would argue, in kind of like social media activism in kind of the post water protector era, and it drives me fucking crazy. I actually, what do they call them, young elders? They're always like there's like a lot of these TikTok I guess accounts that also have these showcase like the young native people who are always talking about like really basic cultural stuff and trying to like educate settlers about things, but they kind of like talk in their like res accent, even though they grew up in like Seattle, or something like that. It's very it's just really, it's a performance. Yeah. It's a performance of wokeness, of a type of indigenous wokeness. It's a performance of authenticity. And these folks take up a lot of space. And they're very like self-righteous. They're, I don't know, right? They think that everything they say is like, God's gift to the movement and things like that. And so Miss Matriarch, was that her name? Rachel Thunder, right? Rachel Thunder plays, was in Prey.
Amber Mid-Thunder.
Amber Mid-Thunder. Oh my gosh. Rachel Thunder. And sorry, Rachel Thunder is like the young woman who went on the spirit walk for Leonard Peltier's freedom. I apologize. I got those names mixed up.
And Amber Mid-Thunder was in Prey.
Amber Mid-Thunder. Amber Mid-Thunder was in Prey. And so she plays the character. Miss Matriarch. Am I getting that right?
Yeah. I think so.
Miss Matriarch. Okay.
Miss Matriarch. And Amber Mid-Thunder was amazing because it's clear that she knows exactly those people that Melanie was just talking about. And
we all know who those people are.
Yeah. Yep. And she was it to a T. And just every word out of her mouth was like, oh my God.
It's cringy, right? It's just like cringy.
Super cringy. And then her male counterpart was, he was worse too. These people tend to be, at least the one, and I have to admit, I don't even watch TikTok. I don't have a TikTok account, so I don't know a lot of that. But the people that I have seen, even though they may actually be, from a native nation, their message and the way they present themselves tends to be very pan-Indian. So they don't have, they're not necessarily speaking from, I'm a Pueblo person, this is my perspective, or I'm a Dene person, so this is my perspective. It's more, they take whatever is glamorous or clever from whatever nation they feel like, and they put it together in these, pseudo profound statements. And that was exactly what this character Amber Mid-Thunder played. Was just putting together just garbage and spewing it out, and it was all just like, oh my God.
It's like new age stream of consciousness, basically.
Yep.
Yeah.
And then there was the one where she's saying she's giving thanks to the
dinosaur.
Nation. The dinosaur Oyate, and didn't she say the Neanderthal and our Neanderthal ancestors? The dinosaur Oyate.
It is so good. I straight up died when she said that. I laughed for 2 minutes. I mean, like, I was by myself. I was laughing so hard I couldn't breathe, and I was crying because it's too, like, on point. So on point, right? Taking the language of, like, acknowledging one as a relative, which became much more common, honestly, in the movement. Kind of since about 2015. Anyway, there's a lot of stuff that's happened, like, historically, that made kinship and relationality much more prominent in Indigenous movements, but taking it to, like, such an absurd extreme, like what you were saying, Elena, just kind of like the stream of consciousness, just like bullshit. Yeah.
Our young relatives. So we would like the spirits to bless our young relatives, and our relatives, our nation of relatives, and our Neanderthal relatives, and the dinosaur Oyate. And it was, oh my God, yes. It was hysterical.
It was too good. Okay, I also have to say that in the Red Nation in the past, like circa 2015, 2016, when like Standing Rock and Oak Flat were really going down, that was like the pinnacle of the movement at the time, the Indigenous decolonization struggle. We were just like, we started to joke about like dinosaur relatives, because when people were using that language, just being like, oh, my relatives here, relatives that. And then to see that in the show, I don't know, like 7 years later, that was too good.
It's great. And so they do this whole like workshop.
Right, for these young people who are there for like an IHS summit or something, youth summit.
It's a youth summit, and the only reason our Res Dogs go is because they're promised a Sonic card. A Sonic gift card.
That's so true.
So they go, and it's sort of a pivotal moment too, kind of in their interpersonal workings, because Bear and Alora Dannon haven't really made up, and Jackie is still sort of outcast by the Res Dogs, and there's that scene where they have to hold a potato between their foreheads, and it's supposed to, I don't know what it's supposed to do. It's supposed to be like some sort of team building or partnership, so you don't let the potato fall on the floor, which was funny because they're all standing there like a potato length apart with this potato between their forehead, trying to be the last ones to hold the potato, which just to me seems like a very Res thing to do, because what's the one thing that we always have a lot of is potatoes. It's
like white potato. It's like russet potatoes.
Yep.
And like flour. But it was also the exercises, right, that Miss Matriarch, and I forgot what his name was. I feel like he's an analog of just like really basic native dudes on TikTok. One in particular, but I won't say his name, that everyone probably knows. It's the Womblands person. Circa earlier 2022 controversy. But it's like juvenile, right? Doesn't at one point Cheese ask like, what does decolonization mean? Doesn't he ask that question at the beginning? And then I forget what Miss Matriarch says, but it's just this like abstract. Isn't she like working on her PhD at like Dartmouth or something like that? And so Cheese is like, what is decolonization? And she gives him this like totally bullshit pseudo-intellectual answer, and he just kind of gets this look on his face. And then they pretty much just spend the rest of the time talking down to these like resi teenagers and asking them to do dumb things like team building exercises. And they're all just kind of looking at each other like, this is such bullshit, right? It's like, let me teach you how to be indigenous, young ones. Meanwhile, these two are like 25. They're like they're like acting like elders, but they're like in their 20s.
And then at some point, I don't know if she is asked or if she offers the information, but she says, well, I'm from, and I don't even remember what nation she said. Maybe she's Lakota because she was saying dinosaur yate. But she says, but I was raised in LA. And she goes on to like really lament and mourn that she was not raised on the res and make this big deal out of it. And Cheese, you could just see the expression on his face, and he's just like shaking his head like, what?
Yeah. And then even the way she like speaks Lakota is really practiced and memorized and performative. And it's not, I don't think the show is making fun of indigenous folks who didn't grow up in their communities or struggle with the language. I mean, I do, so I'm not really, that's not what I'm talking about. It's just people who come from these backgrounds. They're kind of like petty bourgeois kind of backgrounds, and then they get online and they get a massive following, usually from like non-native, usually white folks who are like looking to them as like the beacons of knowledge, and like the pinnacle of indigeneity on social media. And then they get hired to come into like res communities with like, a room full of shit ass kids on the res at this IHS summit. And then they just look really absurd, right? Like in juxtaposition to, I don't know, just like native proles just trying to like survive, whether it's on the res or in the city or anywhere else. And it's like, you can tell that there's like a profound, it's not real. That performance of indigeneity on social media that these characters epitomize, it's not real. And it's definitely not for our people. It's definitely not for our people. It's for like consumption by like white folks.
And they have no clue about any lived experience that these kids are going through. It's all just a performance complete with ribbon skirts and feathers. I think the guy wore feathers or buckskin or something.
Doesn't Amber Midthunder's Miss Matriarch's character wear like doesn't she wear her Sani scarf like wrapped around her head like this?
Uh-huh.
Okay, I'm gonna say it. In the Red Nation, there was a time, or circa 2015, 2016, where this particular look became very popular, and we started calling it the Navajo Pirate. Because it was like, you had people like wrapping their scarves around their heads like that. I guess to imitate the way that like, our like Sani, like Dene women used to do that back in the day. And then wearing their long skirts, and then they would have like their belts with like, I don't know, all of their traditional tools and stuff. And they looked just so they like had all of their jewelry on all the time. And I would be like, well, isn't that kind of heavy? Like, how are you going to run from cops in that outfit at a protest? Or I understood the spirit of wanting to like project oneself that way, but it also honestly seemed so performative that it was like kind of comical. And so it's still kind of fashionable, I think, with online influencers. But yeah, she just looked like one of those like native pirates.
And I used to do it a lot, particularly when I was out and about on the res. We're talking 15, 20 years ago. Mostly because it kept your hair out of your face. If you the way that
like the do-rag look, right? Kind of.
Yeah, and the way that the Navajo grandmothers that used to wear their hair back in the scarf, it keeps the hair out of your face.
And when that's why they used to do it.
Yeah, the wind
it'd be hurting sheep.
The wind is blowing like crazy on the res, and then it actually also, when you're out there and there's not a lot of showers available, keeps your hair relatively clean. So at the end of the day, you can take it off and you can brush your hair, and it's not like full of dirt. I used to do that a lot, and I had a collection of every color of Sani scarf. And now I think, oh, I should do that. And I'm like, oh, but what if somebody thinks I'm like trying to be performative? Because that's what you see. And yeah, it's sad because we used to own it. We don't own it anymore.
Yeah, it's it became like part of the, like when the iconography of the skirt became really popular about 7 or 8 years ago. I think there's a lot of like skirt policing and skirt shaming, and now everyone and their mom wears a ribbon skirt. And don't get me wrong, I'm like, ribbon skirts are so pretty. Like, I understand why everyone wears a ribbon skirt because they're fucking beautiful. Yeah. And they're super comfy.
And you can put any top on, from a t-shirt.
You can put sweatpants underneath them, or like, shorts or anything. So I get it. But it's also, I don't know, it just came out of that, I think that kind of like authenticity performance that was attached to movements from around that time. And it's still a thing. But yeah, the Miss Matriarch. I kind of want to take my Sani scarf off right now and put it on my head the way. Should I do it? I'm gonna do it.
Do it.
Y'all seeing my greasy hair? I worked out before this, and then I didn't wash my hair, which is why I had the scarf on the way that I did.
That's
it wasn't to look cool, even though it looks very cute. It was mostly just to hide my dirty hair. Which, incidentally, so you can either go like this, which is like OG, it's like grandma style.
Yep.
And I don't know, I have a tender place in my heart for our grandmas who used to wear their scarves like this. It really reminds me of like that generation.
Yep.
But I'm talking about the pirate look.
Yep.
I'm talking about like this.
And that's the way I used to do it.
This the do-rag, like the pirate look.
Yep.
This became really popular about 7 years ago because of like the movement aesthetic. Yep. I'm just gonna wear this for the rest of I can't look at myself. I can't do it, Elena. I'm gonna have to put my hair back in a different way. All right. Now that I've done this for everyone. Aw.
Yep.
So.
Yep. I have a picture of someone took a long time ago. I don't even know. But I was driving a pickup truck. I think I was somewhere in Chinle, and I had a yellow one. And I'm driving, and I must have worn this for days because I have this yellow Sani scarf around my head. And I think when I took it off, it was just like black. But that's really what they were used for. Yeah,
that's real. I don't know. Should
not
I do
for
this?
Miss Matriarch. No. Yeah. So that was a great episode, and just. I wonder what a lot of white people thought about that episode, because to me it was just like, oh my God.
Yeah, I actually do. I do wonder what.
Did people really think like, I don't know what people think, but.
I don't know what people think either, but I know as people who do a lot of movement work, it was on point.
It was so on point.
It was on point. Here, I'll put my little thingy on the side. I saw other TRN ladies doing their scarves this way, and I'm copying them because I thought it was super cute. But
yeah, I like that, and it does keep your hair out of your face, and if your hair is dirty, then you.
Yeah, so you can't even tell now. You can't even tell. So yeah, that was that episode. Sorry, we went on, and I have made a lot of noise doing my hair. It's probably going to be a nightmare for Sina to edit the audio, but you know what? I had to do this. I had to demonstrate the pirate look to all of you. Episode 7, the next episode was a really good episode. It was about cheese.
Snake Gold Cheesy Boy, which one of the things I love about, and especially being an older member of the Red Nation and the Red Media. I'm just not the oldest now, which is a good thing, but and the references to things that were pop culture when I was growing up. And so I'm sure a lot of you have read, watched the movie, whatever, The Outsiders, which was written by a high school white female in Oklahoma, and I think it was Tulsa, about gangs and lower income white families living in poverty in Oklahoma in the 60s. And so they took the title Stay Gold Cheesy Boy from the one of the famous lines in that book and movie, Stay Gold Pony
I
Boy.
didn't know that. I mean, I read The Outsiders in middle school, but I
Yep.
don't remember that line. Wow.
Yep.
Look at you, Elena. You got these these 70s and 80s references from this show down pat.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's great because there's somebody, Sterling Harjo is right around my age, I think. So there's these great references to 70s and 80s pop culture things, and Stay Gold Cheesy Boy just makes me smile every time I think about it. But he is such a great character.
Oh, I love that character.
And he gets thrown in this group home because he's hanging out with his uncle, who's gets busted for I don't remember if it's possession or distribution, and so Cheese doesn't have parents, and it's not something that's really evident until you get to like the second season. But
yeah,
he doesn't have parents, so he's been hanging out with his uncle who gets busted. Cheese gets thrown into this group home that's run by this really crazy white guy, and then there are, if I remember correctly, there's a couple of native boys, and then there's some white boys, and maybe some other ethnicities thrown in. But he's like, Cheese is like so chill.
Yeah.
You never see him freak out.
Nope.
Which is what I would have done. And he's just like trying to figure out what the dynamic is of this place he's living in, who the people are. He's just kind to everybody. And at one point, he's having a conversation, and the guy he's talking to says, "Why do you sound like a white girl on Instagram?"
It's another native kid.
Yep.
He's talking to another native kid. Because Cheese is like, "Hi, my name is Cheese. My pronouns are he, him, and his." Oh.
And then and he's just trying to, he's just trying to make it, man. I mean, up until this point, like everybody's had sort of their drama, and Cheese is just like chill. And so you don't realize that here's a kid who doesn't have parents, who doesn't have a stable home environment, who doesn't have, someone taking care of him. And he's just trying to stay alive. He's just trying to exist. And this is a major crisis for the rest of the Res Dogs, who all get together. Even Jackie at this point is now accepted. And they try to break him out, and he refuses. He says, "No, I'm going to stay here. I don't want to cause any trouble." And they have these great, I want to get one of these shirts. They have these t-shirts printed up that say "Free Cheese."
Yeah, I mean, the episode, it's actually incredibly disturbing when his uncle, who he's living with, who's his guardian, I'm assuming, gets arrested. And the way that the cops treat Cheese is incredibly racist, right? The premise, like the reason why he's in the boys' home, is, very similar to, I think, what a lot of young Native people experience. It's incarceration, right? He's in this boys' home for like quote unquote delinquents or whatever. It's basically like soft juvie, right? And it's not just for Native boys, like you said. There's a lot of different boys from different backgrounds who are in this home, and so there's like a commentary on like carcerality, I would say, in that episode that was multifaceted, that I did really appreciate. But then also it wasn't like heavy-handed. When you do political work, like it's kind of required. Well, it is required sometimes to be heavy-handed, but often you're expected to be heavy-handed with making like commentary about things. I certainly am. Probably just because I'm like very passionate and forceful sometimes with things that really bother me. But even though this episode I think was commenting on that, the character of Cheese himself, or maybe it's the choice of this particular young actor and how he chooses to play that character, that is, there's like a grace almost, and a like a gentleness with which Cheese navigates intense, horrific racism, honestly, and just like a really, really fucked up situation where he's like abandoned by his family. And so, again, I just find the show juxtaposes things a lot, sometimes with humor, and then at other times, I think with gentleness that's really refreshing. But it doesn't let you just settle into any one thing very much. The show is always kind of pushing you to, right when you think the show is going to do something, it does kind of the opposite, or it kind of like takes a turn in another direction. And I actually really appreciate that about the writing.
Yeah. I think grace is an absolute perfect word, because you do see that with Cheese, that just his and his wisdom sort of.
Yeah, he's very wise and really smart.
Yeah.
Like he reads.
Yep. And he cares. Even the short time that he's actually in the group facility, when he gets out, he cares about the people that he was in there with. And he says, "Hey, if you need anything when you get out, let me know." And I think grace is an excellent word, because you do feel that from him. And the crazy white guy who runs the place is literally crazy, and you almost think, how the hell did this guy get to be in charge of a house full of young men? And yet at the same time, you're going, yeah, that's probably what most of them are like.
Yeah, it's like, I feel like in the show, Cheese is like being insulted a lot, I feel like in the show, or is just confronted with really like demeaning situations over and over again. And he tends to just like keep his mouth shut, but not in like a way where he doesn't know how to speak for himself, but he like is very thoughtful. He's like a person who thinks a lot before he speaks. And he's, in that conversation where he's sitting outside, I think at a picnic table with this other young Native man who's already a father. I think he's 18, maybe 17. And he's like, "Why do you talk like a white girl on Instagram?" It's like this other Native kid. And she's just like, I read. And even the way he responds, it's like, what am I trying to say? It's like the opposite of the Miss Matriarch type of people, right? Who come in and they're like performing a type of authenticity, and they're like the greater than thou Indigenous person. They're like this is what they're trying to model, right? What an Indigenous person is. And Cheese actually defies the stereotypes because of just who he is and how he speaks and moves through the world. And yet he's like very comfortable. He's like a very comfortable in his body as a young Indigenous man. And it's just really, I just really like it. His character is just, I don't know. It defies stereotypes, but even as he's confronted constantly with people who expect something from him, they expect him to perform and act in a certain way. The way he always responds is with such like grace and like presence in who he is as a person, as an Indigenous person. Like when he asks Miss Matriarch in the previous episode, like, what do you mean by decolonization? He knows what decolonization is. He knows what that is. He's read about it, And so it's like, he's like that understated person who really has a lot of wisdom, but they don't push.
He's non-reactive. And it's and his presence as one so young is really astounding. And it's a beautiful ending, actually, because he does wait it out. He doesn't want to get his friends in trouble. He waits it out. And then from season 1, where he's at the IHS and he befriends the older woman, and she keeps calling him grandson, and he keeps visiting her. Um, and kind of in native kinship, she is his grandmother and he is her grandson. They're from the same community, and their age makes it so. But she ends up basically adopting him, and he moves in there, and he is the happiest you ever see. Cheese is when he finds out he's going to be living with her, and that he is also a character who reveres and respects not only women but elders, is also counts to this presence and this very deep regard. He's a kid who has a strong character, even as young as he is.
He has strong character, you're right. He has deep regard. And you can tell Cheese knows things. He knows like traditional, he has knowledge. He's kind of like got Che vibes, actually, meaning like grandpa vibes. Whereas like the influencer episode is like the young elder, like the performative young elder, like I'm going to tell you what it means to be indigenous. Whereas Cheese is kind of a young elder. Like the vibe is not hyper masculine either, is a very different, really lovely, actually, portrayal of indigenous masculinity. Yeah.
And the exact opposite of performative.
Yeah, the exact opposite. Really genuine. Like, yep. Yeah, that character's pretty fucking great. In the history of like native characters in cinema and TV.
Yep.
Yeah.
I really like him. Yep. The episode after Stay Gold Cheesy Boy was, I think, one of the most powerful episodes of this season, and I cried. I don't cry very easily. I don't cry very much. I really don't cry at TV shows, but Willie Jack going to prison. So she gets a letter from their teacher, and it's a letter that they were supposed to write to their future selves about where they wanted to be when they graduated. And she doesn't know what to do with it. She feels like her friends are not responding, and
yeah, like Reservation Dogs is broken up, and they're not really
so she goes to prison to see Daniel's mom, who's sort of resistant to having any conversations about Daniel, but she gets drawn in because she has a spirit visiting her too. And it's you could kind of feel the tension, like you're not sure. Willie Jack is not getting what she wants from Daniel's mom, and she's not sure what to do. So she actually leaves, and then she comes back again, right? I think.
I think it's the same. No, I think it's the same encounter.
Okay.
They're sitting across the table in the visitation room.
Right.
And
she buys her a whole bunch of stuff from the commissary. Snacks.
Right? Because, Daniel's mom is like, okay, there's a protocol. If you want me to help you, then you have to, give an offering. And so she offers her food. And it's like, sometimes you offer tobacco, you offer corn pollen, like that's what you do when you're asking for like spiritual help from somebody, which is what Willie Jack is basically doing, asking for guidance. But the way that exchange happens is so subtle and not hokey. It's not performative. And the fact that it's happening in public, in a prison, under surveillance, is like really one of the most, profound things I have ever watched as a Native person. God, I'm probably going to cry as we're talking about it. And then what happens after that, I was bawling as hard as I was laughing at the Miss Matriarch episode for like 2 minutes straight, not being able to breathe because I was just cackling so hard. I was crying that hard at this episode. I had to pause it because I lost it. It was so fucking profound. It's actually one of the most incredible things I have ever watched on TV or film in my life.
Yep. And just I think we all have these moments, and I know we've talked about I think we've talked about it before, but there were moments in the last few years where we had a rally at with Red Nation, and it was against they were Albuquerque. They were sending in a lot of police, militarized police, and we had a rally in downtown Albuquerque, and it was pouring rain, and we were marching, and we were all concerned about people walking in the rain, and the elders and young people, and we ended up right in downtown Albuquerque. And the minute we stopped, I think some of our comrades were in the back of a truck, and there were some of us on the street. And the minute we stopped and started just talking and rallying the crowd, and it was like the clouds opened, the sun shined down, and there was a rainbow. And I felt like at that moment, all of our ancestors, and it was almost like I was standing and my back was to Ocupin, which is the Tewa Mountain to the south. And it was at my back, and I was looking to the west, and I was looking towards Mount Taylor, which of course is sacred to a number of us, Pueblo and Dene. And I just felt like I was completely enveloped in ancestral, power and energy. And I felt like watching this episode that I could feel.
Yeah.
She was going through the same thing.
Yeah.
And Daniel's mom had to like coax her, sort of. I don't remember the exact words, but she was saying, close your eyes.
She took her hands. She said, close your eyes. Yep. Very softly. And then you see all the ancestors, all these Creek ancestors appear, including the spirit that's been kind of like needling Daniel's mom earlier in the day. Because the spirit comes to her. She's like, hey, today's the day. She's like, this is happening. She already knew, right? She knew that Willie Jack was going to come and ask. And Daniel's mom is like, I don't want to do this. She's like, go away. Like, I don't want to see you. And she's trying to reject, the power and the gift that she has, which obviously probably is passed down through her family. She probably comes from a family that has strong medicine like that. And so the spirit is like right behind Willie Jack and then all of these ancestors. And the spirit puts her hand on Willie Jack's shoulder. And Willie Jack is just sitting there ostensibly, alone in prison. And she feels the spirit put her hand on her back and she just starts crying. She has a deep intake of breath and just starts crying. And it was like you said, Elena, I swear, I know, right? Like this whole show is not supposed to be, I don't know. It's not really a secular show at all. It's a very deeply indigenous, but it doesn't, like I said, it doesn't pull punches with spirituality. But somehow that particular scene, I swear to God, it did not feel like it was just a bunch of actors pretending to be ancestors. I swear to God, something came through that TV screen and touched me deeply. like spiritually. There was something like that transported me in that scene. And it was like medicine. It was seriously like medicine. I know that Demetrius, our comrade Demetrius, felt that same way. I've had conversations with some other Indigenous folks who are like, yeah, I was just bawling during that scene. Whew.
It was powerful. I mean, it really was, and it was so real because Daniel's mom. I mean, you got that she didn't want to do it. She didn't. She resisted, and the spirit guide who was telling her, it's time, you need to do this, was real. And yeah, that scene was just, that was something else.
I remember I was watching a documentary about, oh gosh, it was a a movement to protect land up at in Haudenosaunee territory in Six Nations in so-called Ontario in 2006, I think is when this went down. Gosh, I forgot the name of it. Very famous, from some real estate development, I think in a border town. And I showed this documentary to some students about a year and a half ago in one of the classes I was teaching in NAS at UNM. And during the course of the documentary, the police, the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, who had been approaching, over the course of several days, the Haudenosaunee people who were holding it down, holding the line to protect this land from settler encroachment, there was a series of interviews done with these cops. And there was this one particular night when it was really going to be very potentially scary because there were a lot of settler vigilantes that were trying to come and kill Native women and youth, particularly on this front line. And it was dangerous. It was like very dangerous. It was physically very dangerous. Very similar to the situation you described. That was in July of 2020 when the uprising was happening and many of us were being threatened by white militia, white supremacist militias and cops. And our comrade had already been shot earlier that summer by someone who's a part of the militia who comes from a police background. And so in these interviews, these like Mounties or whatever, apparently many of them quit the force after that day and that night. And the reason why they did was for mental health reasons. And they claimed there were like maybe 100 people. There were maybe like 100 Haudenosaunee people holding it down on that front line. But these cops swore they saw thousands of people. And they were scared shitless. They said they saw horses, they saw buffalo or something. And they were like, there's no way we're going to take this crowd. There aren't enough of us. And they were just like terrified because they thought they were confronting a crowd of like thousands of Native people. And then when they saw footage of the actual confrontation afterward, and they saw that it was like pretty much only like 100 people in like a van, they were like, no. And this was like several police officers said that they swore they saw thousands of people. And who were those thousands of people? Those were ancestors on that line because they knew, they knew that like it was a really dangerous situation. And like, the people who were really trying to hold it down needed all the help that they could get that day or that night to protect the land. And so, like you said, like we have had those experiences on front lines in the Red Nation before. And it's like, you can actually feel it when it's happening. And it's it's actually very difficult to describe that feeling, especially if you're in a situation where you're confronting your enemy and you have the protection of your ancestors. And so that feeling came flooding back to me also when I watched that episode. And I was just completely overcome. I was just overcome with gratitude. I don't know. Or it was like, I don't know what that feeling was. It was very like, I feel like I was melting, but in a really good way, watching that scene happen. It was very cathartic. It was like almost healing. I don't use that word lightly.
No, it was. It was absolutely cathartic and healing. I was crying. I was like, why am I crying? I'm watching a TV show. But it was almost like something had reached through the screen and said, we have had this experience. You have had this experience. We are all one. That was like,
yeah,
the only way I can describe it. I mean, I looked at those people, the spirits who were standing behind her, and I recognized them, although they were wearing very different attire than my ancestors would have, but I recognized them nonetheless and said, yep, there they are, ready to lift her up, ready to help her move forward. And yeah, it was amazing. Just, yeah, I don't even have words.
No, I'm trying to put it into words and I think I'm failing. And the fact that it was happening in a prison was like mind blowing. That like those spirits don't have boundaries like that. They don't give a shit that there are prison walls, and that you can be, like this mom has lost her son. She's in prison. She is so depressed and just like she's like given up. That's how resentful, right? That's how resistant she was to just like sharing her gift with Willie Jack. And yet it still happened. And it happened in an impossible context, a context in which is the opposite of freedom, which is the opposite, right, of Indigenous people feeling free to practice and to like be who they are, right? It's it's like the repression and the oppression of that. And it still happened. And it was that powerful and that beautiful. I was like, oh my God, this is too much. This is what I carry in my heart every day, literally like manifested on a screen. That I know that the show is like gives us all kinds of looks into the different facets of what it means to like be an Indian. But that right there, that is like what you feel in your soul every day as a Native person in this society. You know what's possible. You know what you have. You know what you're fighting for to continue. And yet you're like in a prison, right? Because that's what colonialism does to you. Oh, wow. But then you're like, but we're still doing it. We can still do this. We still have this power and it still fucking works. Like that, right? Again, mind blowing, just like mind shattered. I was just like, oh my God. Only a Native person who actually understands those things and believes those things could have written that scene.
Yep. That's absolutely true. Yep.
Oh,
I have to go back and watch that scene again. Wow. Yeah.
I'm just gonna have to get the tissues out. Holy shit. If you haven't watched it, it's like the word powerful does not even begin to describe that scene. Yeah. Mic drop, like profound. That shit was profound. Yeah, I mean, we can talk about the catfish KKK, which was the next episode.
Catfish episode. So that was it. Talk about a divergent. Okay,
you go from that to like the catfish sex episode.
I've thought a lot about that episode.
Fucking Reservation Dogs.
Because you've got Big, who's like the other OG Native actor, Zahn McLaren, and he's the cop, and he ends up accidentally taking, I never say this right, ayahuasca.
I think that's what it's called. Ayahuasca.
Yeah. And so he's tripping his brains out, and he's wandering through the woods, and the guy who owns the junkyard,
like the pretendian Okie guy or whatever, who's always saying "Yatta hey,
Yatta hey,"
and Hoka hey.
And he didn't intentionally give it to Big, so he says, well, I'll go on the trip with you. So he takes some, and they're out wandering in the woods, and they come across this group of politicians one of them is I think one of them is a politician.
He's like the governor.
Is it the governor? Oh my God.
It's like the governor of the state. Who's leading the ritual, or I don't know, maybe he's fucking one of the catfish. I don't know.
They're having this, like, they're all in robes, like KKK, but they're, I think, red and
it's like a secret society. I don't know. They all have hoods on.
And Big is investigating the fact that all these catfish have been disappearing.
That's right.
So that was his intention of going to the junkyard anyway, but then he takes this drink of ayahuasca, and he and the crazy pretending guy go wandering off in the woods, and they come on this group of men doing this ritual, and they're all in a circle, like they do, and they're all in robes.
They're like chanting, or right?
Yeah. And they're initiating
like 5 dudes or something.
And part of the initiation is that they have to fuck these catfish. So it's quite graphic. And
they take their robes off, they're bucket, and then they're just like fucking catfish heads.
Yeah. So the first thing that went through my mind is, as someone who has spent some time fishing and has caught catfish, is that they have teeth. I was like, oh my God, that must really hurt, because catfish have barbs in their mouth. So that freaked me out. And then I was like, oh my God. And it was a very interesting episode, because then they're wandering off and tripping their brains out, and they actually get captured by...
There's like a security for the KKK thing group.
Yeah. And then Deer Woman appears to Big and frees him, and they end up capturing all of these politicians, and they have been the ones who are stealing the catfish. And what am I missing?
So the politicians are like, the society is based on, what do they talk about? Something about land, like stealing the land. And what do you remember what they were like talking, the politics, or like the rationale for this group? Because the governor, I think, is like the supreme leader or whatever, and he's speaking, and it's very much like a commentary on settler colonialism.
Yep. And
like settler kinship, which is forged through like stealing land and killing Indians, and like slavery, enslaving people, basically. Yeah. And so they're like kind of glorifying and extolling this as like their type of kinship together. And then they're like initiating these dudes, and then they take their robes off and, fornicate with catfish heads and stuff like that. But
yep.
It was kind of like, because Deer Woman ends up in the show, right? And she kills the security guy to save them, to save Big and then the pretendian junkyard guy, who are still tripping. And then at the very end of the episode, Big is like wandering out. He's like, they arrest them, right? They arrest these are very powerful white men. Like, they're like politically powerful. They're very wealthy, right? This is like a wealthy secret society, I think modeled off of the KKK, or like a spoof. And at the very end of the episode, Big is wandering back out onto like the main road, and he's walking up it. And the ghost, or the almost like the Bigfoot type spirit from the episode where Willie Jack's dad from the first season is out in the forest, and he thinks he sees Daniel or something, hunting.
Yeah.
Like, kind of like lumbers across the road behind Big, and Big stops, and he turns around and looks, and there's nothing there, and then he turns back and he just like walks off, and that's the end of the episode. So there's a lot of yoded shit, is basically what I'm saying, that's happening in this episode. But I think what they were saying is that like truth is actually stranger than fiction. Yeah. So they're tripping, and they think what they're seeing happening, what these white men are doing, is like, it's just a hallucination, but it's real. Yeah. Like, settler colonialism is actually like more horrific, and like white settler masculinity is more horrific than any of the ghosts or like the deer women you could possibly concoct in the world. Like, you can't hallucinate that shit.
And the things that white people will do to like bond with white men will do to bond with other white men is like, I tried to think, what the hell is the message behind fucking catfish? I mean, it's just like, no matter what we think as Native people, what the reality is much weirder and much more fucked up.
Exactly. Like, that's like their type of relationality with like the earth and with nature, is they, fuck catfish heads.
And particularly since, catfish seems to play such an important role in this community, because the place that everyone sort of gathers is that gas station. I mean, that's in the first episode where they steal the flaming hot Cheetos truck. They go into this place. It's something in Cleo's, and I remember that because of our Cleo.
Oh, that's right.
And that's where they all go to eat catfish.
Yep. I think someone has like a catfish is life sign somewhere also. So it's like, this is like settler kinship. You're like, it's like weirder and more horrific than you could possibly think. And that this is the only way that these like powerful white settler men can have any type of kinship with the land. It's, it was disturbing, but it was also, I was just like, that's on point.
Yeah.
Well done.
Yep. Yeah. Unlike the prison Willie Jack ancestors, this one was designed to make you super uncomfortable. And it did make me super uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Well, are the catfish the native people, and that's what they're fucking? Because that seems like it could be what it is. But
that you're right. It was meant to make you really uncomfortable. But yeah.
So watch it, but don't watch it with your kids.
Yeah. Yeah, good call. So that's the second to last episode of the season.
And then so one of the great things about the episode with Willie Jack in the prison and is that it like emboldens her. She feels like she knows what she needs to do, and she basically demands of the other res dogs that this is what we got to do. We have to go to California.
She shares the letter that Daniel wrote in the 9th grade with them, right?
Yep. And damn it, they're gonna go. Like, Laura Dannon has just come back from an attempt to go to LA, and that didn't work out, but they're all gonna go. And this was such a great episode, I think, because it kind of closed the loop on a lot of things. Like the very first episode, you see the res dogs are wanting to go to California, and then all of what transpires in between the first episode and this final episode in season 2 is like a failed attempt to go to California. Well, then Cheese decides he doesn't want to go to California because he wants to stay in the community. And then you have the great scene in the end of season 1 where the tornado is about to come through, and they're all hiding in the church, and the spirit is there, and he says to the statue in the church, "Hey, white Jesus." And I think of all the movies that I've seen in my life, and all of the sort of catchphrases that have become part of the vernacular, depending on your generation, but even not. I feel like this series has given Native people a way, has created some of that vernacular for us too. And so when they get to LA, and of course, the car gets stolen and they're wandering around, and they see this guy who is part of a homeless community that's there in LA. And Willie Jack says, "Is that white Jesus?" And this guy, he looks like white Jesus. He's wearing white robes. He's got long hair. It's blonde. He looks white. Oh my God, I just died. Because, like, where else would you use the reference to white Jesus? Hey, look, that's white Jesus. It just cracked me up.
It's like the show is trolling its own vernacular, its own, like, zingers.
Yep. And then they make it to California, and they're trying to find the water. They're trying to find the ocean. And it's like this pilgrimage that they've done. And all of a sudden, like, this guy appears and he's playing the saxophone. And of course, I'm, sitting in my living room with my daughter and my husband, and I was like, oh my God. This is just like, it's like, we did that movie, Lost Boys.
We've talked about that, right? We talked about that in our Halloween episode.
Yep.
I think. Yep. What's that guy's name? The guy wearing the codpiece?
Yeah. Oh no, and now it's out of my head. Oh my God. It'll come to me. The guy with the saxophone from the beach scene in Lost Boys. And he appears on the beach.
He's like at the end of Santa Monica Pier or something. He's at the end of a pier playing the saxophone, and that's the end of the entire season.
Yep. And I was thinking to myself, somebody grew up in the 80s watching these shows and just thought this is a great person to just throw into this show. And you've got this really joyous sort of group of kids who have, achieved what they set out to do, which was, take this trip to the ocean, to the Pacific Ocean. I don't think it was LA as much as it was just to be in the Pacific Ocean. And they're all there and dancing around. And it was a good ending, I think, to this season.
Yeah, and you're right. It brings like the arc of the show around, kind of full circle. The scene of them running onto the beach, so the car gets stolen and all their money gets stolen, so that they have to follow white Jesus too. They just like blindly follow. He's a stranger or whatever, but he's like, I can lead you there, and so they're just like walking for hours through LA. I don't even know where they were when they were eating tacos and the car got stolen, but presumably they've had to walk for hours and many miles because LA is ginormous to get to the ocean. And it was really cute, the scene of them at the ocean, because I was like, aw, this is like when res kids, who've never been to the ocean, who like never even been outside of the res. Probably the furthest that any of them had ever been was like Tulsa, or Oklahoma City, and here they're confronted with the Pacific Ocean. And it's like both incredibly magical and terrifying at the same time. I just remember I went to the ocean once. I've been to the ocean before, but with a couple of Navajo relatives, some younger ones from Red Nation, back when I was working at the University of California, Riverside, right after I finished my PhD. And we were all excited to go to the ocean because we're like Navajo, and like, oceans are like these fancy things to us. And we all ran towards the water because we were all excited. And then this huge wave came up, and then we all started screaming, and we ran in the opposite direction. Because we were like, you're just not used to the ocean. You've never been around something like that when you come from that kind of background. And so, yes, it's magical, but it's also like, it's the ocean. You have to be careful. It's like very powerful.
Terrifying.
It's terrifying. Yeah. And so it's like, there's all this wonder, but then you're also like, oh, wait, we don't know what we're doing. We're We're a bunch
Well,
of
we're
res kids from
also
Oklahoma.
we're also desert kids. I mean, we're desert dwellers, and like Tulsa is not desert, not like East. Well, East, not Tulsa, Oklahoma. Eastern Oklahoma is not desert like New Mexico, Arizona, the Southwest is, but still they're not used to seeing that. I mean, see the Pacific Ocean for the first time is huge, and
It is.
I absolutely agree with you. The anytime I'm near water is I still have that sense of, oh my God, I want to run into it and like wade up into the water up to my, knees. And
Yep.
then I'm like, oh my God, but what's in it?
And then you freak out, right? A bunch of our comrades went to Hawaii back in August. And so we're releasing podcast content right now from that trip, but it was really cute seeing them all like in the ocean in Hawaii, because like you could tell that they were just so like thrilled to be in the ocean. It's just a bunch of like landlocked Indians going to the ocean is like a thing. I'm just saying, it's a thing. It's a thing you always remember. If you come from one of these types of homelands, you will always remember the first time you dipped your toe in the ocean. That's all I'm saying. And so anyway, that particular scene, and they're just like cute. They're just like running into the ocean and like, frolicking on the beach.
Yep.
Been there.
and it's Tim Capello, who is
That's
the
who it is.
saxophone player. And the great thing, other than the fact that he's just an 80s icon, is that the song he plays in Lost Boys is I Still Believe. So he's out there with his saxophone playing I Still Believe, which is like the theme song in Lost Boys. And to me, that was just a little 80s, reminder. But it was beautiful.
I love it. Got the Outsiders reference, which is not 80s. That's much older. It's like 60s or something.
Yeah.
You got like the Lost Boys. Alora is from Willow. Yep. It's like another 80s hit. I don't know.
And Willie Jack. I mean, I don't know that we talked about this when we talked about the first season. Maybe we did. But Willie Jack is a reference to Billy
Jack. Yeah.
Which was, I remember that came out, I think, in 1972 or something.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a white guy, but he's playing a native.
Like a militant native guy or whatever.
Yeah, who came back from Vietnam, and he's all fucked up. And he's also a martial arts expert. And you're never quite sure what tribe he is because they've like mishmashed. It was all filmed in New Mexico, but sometimes he wears one of those big hats, like Dene hats with the hat
like
band.
The wide brim.
Yep. And yet he hangs out in the cliff dwellings, which were mostly Pueblo. But then at one point he's in Monument Valley. And then another point, he does a snake ceremony, and they invoke Wovoka, who's the Paiute ghost dance prophet. So it was a very weird movie.
But it's iconic.
It's very iconic, and it's very weird. Because the more they tried to make Billy Jack look cool, the worse it got. Like then you had the trial of Billy Jack, and then you had Billy Jack Goes to Washington. But it was a very iconic movie in the 70s, which I think is where Willie Jack gets her name. So yeah, a lot of references in the show that you might not catch unless you were native.
Yep, I love it. I think I said this when we did our review like a year and a half ago of season 1, but the super cool thing about Reservation Dogs is that it references like the canon of native pop culture, which I've never seen done before. like I was saying, it trolls its own zingers, like the white Jesus, which I'm sure became a meme. And like everyone, it's like when you sang the Tom Petty song in a crowd of Native people at an IPD thing in 2022, everyone knew what that was from. And it's now part of the canon, right?
Yep.
Of like Native pop culture. And so that's what's super cool about this show, is that it actually references that canon. First of all, it acknowledges that it exists. That's no one ever acknowledges that it exists. People think, I don't know what people think about Native people. Like we just don't like have lives, or we don't do things like that. We don't produce like creative things like that. But yeah, that's one of the super cool things about the show. It'll reference something from like 1972 all the way up until, land back 2021.
Yep.
And even though the main characters are Zoomers of a Zoomer generation, it's like a very multi-generational reference through that canon in the show. And it just moves seamlessly back and forth.
Yep.
Love it.
Yeah. Love the second season. Can't wait.
Which one was your favorite episode? Let's sign off doing that. We've been talking for over 2 hours, by the way, so this is going to have to be a two-parter.
Yep. My favorite episode, hands down, has to be the one in the prison. Absolutely. I mean, I could, there was definitely close second. The Aunties was a close second, and Cheese. But I mean, they were all good. But yeah, that episode reached to the screen and just pulled my heart out.
Agreed. I agree. If there's I know we've had pretty much spoiler alerted the entire show. We probably should have said this before we did the episode, but if you don't have a chance to watch anything, watch that episode. Especially if you're a Native person, holy shit. You will be changed. Trust me, after watching that episode. Yep. Well, this is cool. I'm glad this is like our kickoff for 2023. This was actually really fun to go back over this. We went slow, just like we said at the beginning, slow burner. We did not rush ourselves. We talked for over 2 hours about this show. Yeah. I don't know how to edit this. Maybe it's a 2-part episode. Maybe some of it's for bonus content behind the paywall. I don't know. But I'm glad we took our time.
Me too.
Well, travel well. And for everyone listening, thanks for joining us again. And we'll be back in a couple of weeks. Or maybe not. We actually have so much content right now. I'm not really sure where RPH is going to be plugging in, as we continue to just release a ton of new content. So that's something you can look forward to in 2023. There's a ton of content that you're going to find on the podcast. Of course, RPH, Elena, and I will be here on a regular basis, as will Nick and Jen from the Red Nation podcast. But also we have a ton of special stuff that we're doing all throughout the spring. So it's going to be super diverse. Lots of different voices on the podcast this spring and this year. So that's exciting. But thanks for joining.